Yes, we all search for calm in our daily lives, don't we? And we try to avoid chaos as much as humanly possible. Not completely possible, of course, and even more difficult if you're a head football coach in the Southeastern Conference. If you're a football program in the SEC, chaos comes with the territory. But at some places more than others, especially at present day on November 6th, 2025, as we head into the first Saturday, get ready for the first Saturday in November, which has always been, for or at least for a long time, a special day because it meant Alabama versus LSU. That game doesn't quite have the same resonance this year for reasons that we're going to discuss, because while everyone is quietly going about their business in Tuscaloosa, there is anarchy at Auburn, lunacy at LSU as they search for new coaches and they get ready to take on Alabama. LSU this weekend, Auburn at the end of the month with interim head coaches. Plenty to talk about, as always, when the larger subject is SEC football. So let's get into it. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Skarbinski, a.k.a. Scarbo, and this is ScarboKnows. Thank you very much for tuning in. And as we like to remind you, if you do watch on YouTube, and you can check out my channel there, Kevin Skarbinski _ScarboKnows, we encourage you to subscribe to the channel. As Bluto said in Animal House, don't cost nothing, but you'll get plenty of good information and hopefully a little entertainment along the way as well. And we want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services. Not a lot of businesses have been around since 1992. The Rice family has. That's because they treat you right. They are good friends of mine. They'll take great care of you. If you need tax advice, you need to look at retirement planning. I'm not in that category. I don't plan on retiring anytime soon, despite some of the email suggestions and social media posts that I see. Sorry to disappoint those folks, but I plan on doing this for as long as possible. And when I get to that point, I know I'm going to make one call. I'm going to scan one QR code, and that'll be for Money Management Services in Birmingham. We'll hear more from them later in the show. So let's get into it. Here on the Sidelines.live network, executive producer Brendan Martin steering the ship, much the way Kalen DeBoer has calmed the waters in Tuscaloosa after the troubles in Tallahassee on opening weekend. And it is hard to believe that we are we're already deep into Alabama LSU week. But nobody's talking about Alabama. Everybody is talking about Auburn after the dismissal of Hugh Freeze and LSU after the unceremonious exit of Brian Kelly. And so Alabama this month, it will bookend the month with games against probably its two biggest rivals of late. You can obviously put Georgia in that category as well because they've both risen to the top. Alabama was at the top of the SEC, and Georgia has usurped LSU's position as 1A, 1B vis-a-vis Alabama. But this has always been a special month because Alabama starts it with the LSU game and it closes it with the Auburn game. And those rivalries, those series have given us an incredible amount of drama. But all the drama now on the plains and on the bayou seems to be happening off the field. And this LSU-Alabama game doesn't quite have the same buzz. We're going to get into some details on that in a moment. But first, let's meet, come on down, your interim guys, your new head coaches at Auburn and LSU, at least for a month or so. Say hello to DJ Durkin and Frank Wilson. Now, if you live in the state of Alabama, and particularly if you are an Auburn fan, you are very familiar, have become very familiar with DJ Durkin. And first and foremost, let's say this. DJ Durkin has done an outstanding job in his second season as the Auburn defensive coordinator. There was one side of the ball at Auburn that has been in complete disarray and has been a massive disappointment. And that was the side of the ball run by the former head coach, Hugh Freeze, which is the primary reason he is the former head coach. And DJ Durkin is the interim coach because Auburn's defense has been elite. And this has been one of the fun facts of the season. I wish I had thought of it myself. I'm not sure who did, but kudos to them. I first saw it on social media. I think it was on X or Twitter, if you prefer. And that there are, at this point in the season, there are only 3 football bowl subdivision programs that have given up no more than 25 points in a single game. Number 1, Ohio State. Number 2, Indiana. And you have to go a long way to find Auburn's number. Auburn has yet to give up more than 24. And that's largely because of the great work of DJ Durkin. But we're not here to talk about him as a defensive coordinator, nor are we here to talk about Frank Wilson, who has been an outstanding recruiter. He's had several different stints at LSU. And on the likability scale of people connected to LSU football through the years, Frank Wilson would be at one end of that spectrum toward the top, and Brian Kelly would be at the other end of that graph near the bottom, if not at the bottom. So both of these guys, DJ Durkin and Frank Wilson, very well liked by their players. They have made themselves at home. Now, Frank's a native. He's a Louisiana guy. And so he is well loved and well respected in that state, as he should be. And in the profession, again, just an elite recruiter. And then DJ Durkin has quickly made himself a very popular figure in the state of Alabama, in the Auburn family, because of the good work he's done the last 2 years. But now we have to look at them as head coaches because they are going to lead their teams for this final month. They're not going to the playoff, neither of these teams. They're not in contention for the playoff. They're not, as Hugh Freeze predicted, suggested that Auburn would be in the playoff discussion. So now their role is to play spoiler. In addition to auditioning, say that 5 times fast, in addition to auditioning, perhaps for the head coaching job without the interim tag. And maybe someone should explain to the new LSU president what the word interim means. He seems to have a little bit of trouble grasping the concept with Verge Ausberry, who is the acting athletic director at LSU. The new president from McNeese State said at first he was going to take the interim tag off. Then he backtracked on that. Of course, more clowns for the LSU circus, led by the man with the big red nose, Governor Jeff Landry. So what kind of head coaches will DJ Durkin and Frank Wilson be? Well, we have a clue because this is not the first time they've been a head coach. Now, again, this is an interim situation, so it's a little different than when you're the actual boss at the start of a season. But both of these guys have been head coaches before. DJ Durkin for 2 years at Maryland, Frank Wilson for 4 years at UTSA, a.k.a. the Roadrunners. And we're familiar with them in this area because they played in Conference USA alongside UAB, and now they're in the American along with UAB. So what kind of head coaches were they when they were the bosses? Mid is the word the kids like to use now. Not good, Bob. Not Bob Stoops by any means. Look at DJ Durkin's record. And we've talked about this. And look, I got 2 very deep emails from someone who is clearly a DJ Durkin fan and supporter and would love to see him get full consideration for the Auburn full-time head coaching job, who pointed out to me flaws what he perceived in my logic that DJ Durkin, based on these numbers, 2 years at Maryland, 10-15 overall, 5-13 in the Big Ten, 1-8 against ranked teams. And I'm going to say these numbers again, whether you like them or not. Scoreboard is what the scoreboard is. In those 9 games against ranked teams, DJ Durkin's teams, and again, he's a defensive guy, gave up an average of 45 points and lost by an average of 34 points. 59-3 to Michigan, 66-3 to Penn State, 62-3 to Ohio State, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my faithful correspondent who didn't like my column on Monday in the Birmingham News, and I encourage you to read today's column in the Birmingham News, which is now an online-only subscription publication, but you also can find links to my columns on al.com. He said, wait a minute, Nick Saban didn't have the greatest record. When he was at Michigan State against ranked teams, and he lost by some large margins. Yes, he did. He got smoked by Nebraska in his very first game at Michigan State. Nick Saban did. But Nick Saban also beat a number 1 ranked Ohio State team. He beat a Michigan team, I think at one point that was number 3. Another year was number 7. He beat Notre Dame when they were number 10 in the country. So please, don't insult my intelligence. Don't come at me comparing DJ Durkin at Maryland to Nick Saban at Michigan State. You have lost the plot if that is your attempt at an argument in DJ Durkin's favor. So for those reasons, I don't think it would be a good idea for Auburn, even if they go 3-0 with DJ Durkin as the interim head coach and they beat ranked Vanderbilt. And kudos to Vanderbilt. We're going to get into the college football playoff rankings in a bit. Kudos to Vanderbilt for breaking into the rankings for the first time since the playoff poll started back in 2014. They got to play Vanderbilt in Nashville this weekend, and then they get Mercer, which actually I've been dissing Mercer as Auburn's FCS punching bag, but Mercer is no punching bag. They're a good football team. And then, of course, Auburn welcomes Alabama for the Iron Bowl, and who knows what could happen there. But even if he goes 3-0, I don't think he's qualified. I think there are better candidates. And by the way, this just in, I saw this right before we came on the air. Brent Key from Georgia Tech, who I think I have advocated for on this show and elsewhere as someone who has some Pat Dye in him and might be the kind of ball coach that Auburn really needs. He had some really strong comments about this whole idea of his name being tossed out for other jobs. And at the end of his screed, he said something to the effect, I saw this on social media. I'm not going to get it just right, so apologies to Brent Key. He said something to the effect of, cut me open and see what colors I bleed. Hello. Of course, he's a Georgia Tech guy. And so there is the question, would he leave his school? And that same question applies to Kenny Dillingham, whose name is gathering traction with the Auburn job, former Auburn OC under Gus Malzahn. We'll see, but he's an Arizona State guy. He's home. We'll see if that those heartstrings are strong enough to keep him in Tempe. And then Frank Wilson has been a head coach for 4 years at, as I said, UTSA. And in those 4 years, there you go. Brendan Martin, executive producer extraordinaire, on it as always. Slice me open and see what colors I bleed, said Brent Key. And, of course, one of those colors would be Georgia Tech Old Gold, because that is his school. So maybe it won't be so easy to get him out of Atlanta. We'll see. Although, as we get into the playoff poll in a few minutes, you will see that the ACC is not well regarded at the moment. And you can lose one game, as Georgia Tech did last week for the first time. They were undefeated. They lost to NC State, and all of a sudden they're out of the playoff poll, or would be if they were choosing the 12 teams today. So what do home ties mean? We'll find out with Brent Key, and we'll find out with Kenny Dillingham, because they'll have opportunities elsewhere, whether it's Auburn or somewhere else. Now, Frank Wilson has been a head coach, and one of the things I thought was interesting about Frank Wilson, the interim coach at LSU, who will lead the Tigers into Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday, he was 0-3 against UAB when he was the coach at UTSA. And UAB, of course, was coached by Bill Clark, one of the best football coaches in the country in the last decade. I will die on that hill. I will fight you in making that argument. And I know there are Auburn fans out there who laughed at the possibility or the suggestion that Bill Clark was on Auburn's radar, for example, when they hired Brian Harsin. Excuse me, but he was. And there was a conversation with a rather prominent Auburn supporter during that search. It didn't go very far, and there are reasons for that. Maybe one day we'll get into those. But Auburn would have been far better off with Bill Clark as its head coach, even with a bad back that would lead him to spinal fusion surgery, than they were with Brian Harsin, or I might add, with Hugh Freeze. So Frank Wilson didn't compete very well in the 3 years that he was the head coach at UTSA, and UAB had a football program. When it came back on the field in 2017, Frank Wilson got smoked pretty much in all 3 games by Bill Clark and the Blazers. So I don't have a lot of faith in LSU. I do say this. The interim guy bump is real. We saw it at UAB when they played Memphis. They had no business being within miles of Memphis in Protective Stadium that was far. What's the opposite of a sellout? Well, the place wasn't empty, but it was closer to empty than it was to full. And still, UAB played Memphis off its feet, and they gave Memphis its only loss. Although Memphis right now would be in the playoff, although they're not in the, this is very interesting, they're not in the playoff committee's top 25. No group of 5 team is. Welcome to the future. This is part of the goal, to squeeze out the little guys and pump up the big guys and get more of the big guys in the playoff and tamp down the chances for the little guys to compete for a national championship. It's just reality. And this is a good example of it. But UAB got that interim guy bump. Florida got the interim guy bump with Billy Gonzalez against Georgia. They didn't win the game. They really should have. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. We've heard that a lot with Florida under Billy Napier. Florida had the talent to compete with Georgia, and they did compete with Georgia for 4 quarters. Georgia just did what Georgia does. They pulled off their Undertaker routine, popped out of the coffin late, and won the game. You got to wonder if at some point that's going to bite them. Got to wonder if it'll be against Georgia Tech, which played Georgia off its feet in multiple overtimes last year. And I remember watching that game and thinking, Georgia Tech is hitting Georgia in the mouth. Georgia Tech is not backing down 1 inch from Georgia, the way Auburn used to play against Georgia before they went off on this, what is now a 9-game losing streak in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. And I remember thinking at the time, Auburn under Brent Key would be a very different place than it was at the time under Hugh Freeze. So Florida got that interim guy bump. UAB got the interim guy bump. A lot of schools get that. Is LSU going to get it Saturday in Bryant-Denny Stadium? They'll play hard. No doubt. Because they know Frank Wilson. They care about Frank Wilson. And if they have any pride about themselves as individuals, the Tigers will play hard. Whether it's enough, we'll get into that at the end of the show. We'll make a prediction. We haven't done that in a few weeks. And I think Auburn will get that similar bump in Nashville. The problem is Auburn has been playing hard. Auburn has not lacked for effort. Auburn has lacked for execution and play calling and coaching on the offensive side of the ball. And guess what? The guy in charge of all that is gone. But the other guys, Derek Nix, who's calling plays, and you got to love DJ Durkin, taking in a subtle but clear shot at Hugh Freeze when he said Derek Nix will call the plays on every down. Got to love that. So Auburn will get a bump. They'll play hard. They'll bring it. They'll bring the energy. They'll bring the noise. Unfortunately, they're going to bring the same offense. Ashton Daniels will get to start. That is a mismatch of mammoth proportion at the quarterback position against Diego Pavia. So what happened this week? We got the first playoff poll, right? Let's look at, before we get to that, see, here I go. See, I am doing exactly what I've been complaining about. I have fallen into my own trap. We are 20 minutes into the show. I've barely mentioned Alabama. And Alabama is not the reason that the Alabama LSU series has dropped off. Let's look at that, Brendan. Let's look at some of the ways that the Saban Bowl has lost its luster. Of course, it's no longer the Saban Bowl since Nick Saban is retired. And despite what Shaquille O'Neal thinks, he's not going to take the LSU job. He's not going to take any coaching job again. But look what's happened to this game. College Game Day, this was almost an annual event. 10 of the last 17 years, College Game Day was at the Alabama-LSU game, whether it was in Tuscaloosa or Baton Rouge. And that is the series that has been featured most in that time. They haven't been to another single rivalry game as much as they've been to LSU-Alabama or Alabama-LSU since 2008. 10 of the last 17 years. You know where College Game Day is going to be Saturday? Lubbock, Texas, for BYU and Texas Tech. And good for them. That's where they should be. LSU is unranked heading into this game for the third time in 6 years. Third time in 6 years. That didn't start with Brian Kelly. It started with Ed Orgeron, Coach O, who's trying to get whatever job he can find in college football. Maybe he'll be the water boy for the new LSU coach. But unranked, third time in 6 years. LSU not holding up its end of the bargain. And then Alabama's just taken over this series. They've won 4 of the last 5 and 12 of the last 14 since the 2011 game of the century. And I got to tell you, for a game in which not a single touchdown was scored, LSU prevailed 9-6 in overtime in Bryant-Denny Stadium. 2 of the best defenses you will ever see on a college football field. You may never see 2 defenses that good oppose each other in a college football game ever again. I forget the number of players that ended up in the NFL from both rosters. It was astronomical. And for a game in which there were very few offensive fireworks, you were on the edge of your seat. Whether you were in the press box as I was, whether you were in the bleachers, whether you were on the 50-yard line or in the upper deck in Bryant-Denny, that game, you just knew at any point, because a one play could decide the game. One long pass play, a DB falls down, one long run, Trent Richardson hits the gas, whatever it might have been, it was an outstanding football game. It was fitting of the game of the century. And since that time, this has not been the same rivalry. Alabama, as I said, has won 12 of the last 14. Got their revenge in the national championship game after the 2011 season, and LSU has won exactly twice since. Once with the best team in LSU history in 2019, and even in that game, even with Joe Burrow en route to the Heisman, even with all those future NFL stars on offense in particular, it was 46-41 with a banged-up Tua Tagovailoa playing quarterback for Alabama. It wasn't over until it was over. LSU kind of jumped out early, kind of controlled the game for the most part, but final score was 46-41. And then, of course, we all know what happened in 2022, Brian Kelly's first year at LSU, when Alabama went to Baton Rouge, and Kelly, one of the gutsiest decisions he made there, went for 2 at the end of the game, got it, and beat Alabama and kept Alabama out of the playoff. Didn't get LSU into the playoff, but kept Alabama out of it that year, which is always a feather in anyone's cap when you can do that. But that's it. Those are the highlights for LSU in this series since the game of the century. So if this game has slipped, it's not because Alabama has slipped. It's because LSU has fallen, and we'll see if they can get up. And here are some ways that we can measure where LSU is, where it was, where it isn't, where it wants to be, where it would like to go. Let's look at the poll rankings. As we all know, the first college football playoff poll of 2025 came out Tuesday night. And I'll tell you what, more words are spoken and written and viewed and heard on this subject that amount to very little than any other subject in college football. It's the first one, people. There will be more, and only the last one really matters. But we're all looking for clues, for breadcrumbs, for what does this committee emphasize? What's important to these guys? Is it vibes? I saw a lot of reaction saying these guys are all about vibes more than they are metrics. I don't necessarily agree with that. And Dave Bartu, who's a regular guest on Rob Brown's excellent show every morning on the Sidelines.live network, he said the exact opposite. And when it comes to metrics, I'm listening to Dave Bartu. You should too. You should follow him on Twitter. So this is the total number of times each SEC school has been ranked by the College Football Playoff Committee since the committee came into existence in 2014, the year of the 14 playoffs inauguration. And of course, Alabama has been in there more than any school in any league. I think Ohio State's right there with them. 67 weeks, Alabama has been ranked in the playoff poll. And of course, that's the high ranking for each school, the category on the right. And Alabama's been number one 24 different times. Then Georgia, of course, they've been in the poll 55 weeks. They're in it this week. They've been number one 15 times. Interestingly, LSU is not next among the current SEC membership. Oklahoma is third in terms of all-time playoff poll appearances among current SEC schools. They've been in it 53 times to 47 for LSU. Oklahoma never got up higher than number two. LSU, of course, has been number one 3 times. That was back in 2019. And then Ole Miss, surprisingly, is next, followed by Texas and Auburn. And I say that because we're talking about Alabama, we're talking about LSU, we're talking about Auburn. Interestingly, they're in the top half of the league. Auburn and Texas tied with 29 appearances in the playoff poll. Each of them has gotten as high as number 2 in that poll. But we're going to find out when we look at our next graphic why there's a difference there. Texas ascending, Auburn descending in that regard. So let's look at the last time each SEC team was ranked by the College Football Playoff Committee. 9 on the left side of your screen, you see 9 SEC schools because 9 schools, a new record, were listed in the top 25 on Tuesday, led by Texas A&M at 3, 4 of the top 6, Alabama 4, Georgia 5, Ole Miss 6. How would you like to be the Rebels? To be 6th in the country in the playoff poll, but 4th in your own conference. Food for thought for Lane Kiffin as he contemplates his future. Maybe. So not all those 9 teams, Texas at number 11, Oklahoma at number 12, Vanderbilt 16 for the first time. Kudos to Clark Lee. More good work there. Missouri at 22, Tennessee at number 25. So 9 teams were ranked in the poll on Tuesday. Then we look at the other unlucky 7. And the last time that they were ranked, and you see South Carolina was ranked in the last poll last season, the Selection Sunday poll, if you will. LSU was ranked in November this time last year. They came in at number 22. Then they fell out of the poll. Mississippi State and Kentucky haven't been ranked in the playoff poll since 2022. Arkansas since 2021. And look at the last 2 names on that list, Auburn and Florida. Auburn's last appearance in the playoff poll at number 17, November 9th, 2021. Florida, their last appearance in the playoff poll, December 20th, 2020, the final poll of the COVID season. They were number 7. And then if you look, the last 3 spots on that list, Florida, Auburn, and Arkansas, what else do they have in common? They're all looking for new head coaches, as is LSU. So getting to the playoff matters in the SEC. Getting in the playoff rankings, we don't think about this as often, but that matters too. That is something to hang your hat on. If you're a coach like Shane Beamer, whose program has fallen off, you just fired your offensive coordinator, Mike Shula, late in the season. That's an unusual move. You can say, we were ranked in the last playoff poll just last season. If anyone is contemplating whether you should continue as the South Carolina head coach. So that matters. Don't think it doesn't. And that's why, again, the last 3 teams on that list who have been absent from a playoff poll for the longest period of time are all looking for new head coaches. Arkansas, Auburn, and Florida. And, of course, LSU is on that list as well. So what's going to happen Saturday? in Bryant-Denny Stadium. As I said, let me talk about this a little bit before Brendan. Hold off on the prediction for a second, and you can read more about this subject in my column on AL.com today, and it's about Kalen DeBoer. Do you realize what he's accomplished in less than 2 years at Alabama? And you have to have some perspective, some historical perspective on Alabama football to appreciate what has happened since January of 2024, when Nick Saban shocked the world and said, "I'm out." What happened the last time an Alabama football coaching legend said goodbye? You got to flash all the way back to 1982, Paul Bear Bryant's last season. And what happened in the wake of his retirement, and then sadly, he passed away shortly thereafter, after his last game? Chaos. Absolute, utter chaos. They hired Ray Perkins, a former Alabama player, who I came to know and appreciate some years later. Sadly, Ray passed away a few years ago. Ray was a good football coach, but Ray was also very confrontational. And Ray knew he had to do things his way in Tuscaloosa. He couldn't try to be Bear Bryant, and he didn't. And he changed so many things about the Alabama football program, from the radio announcer, John Forney, to taking down Bear Bryant's tower, his beloved, iconic practice field tower. And you can imagine how well that went over with the Alabama fan base, especially when Ray Perkins didn't win the way that Bear Bryant had won. Then they hired Bill Curry, and you want to talk about chaos and calamity. His second year, Alabama loses the homecoming game to Ole Miss, does not complete a single pass in the entire game. And I think it was by Monday morning, someone had thrown a brick through Bill Curry's office window. And yes, that happened. It's not fictional. It was not made up for sympathy by a Curry supporter, a Curry backer, or Curry himself. But again, chaos. It took Alabama 3 athletic directors and 3 head coaches to get it right after Bear Bryant, and they got it right when Hootie Ingram, the AD, hired Gene Stallings, who, of course, was the most like Bear Bryant. He didn't try to be like Bear Bryant. That was his personality. Old school, hard-nosed, tough as saddle leather. Gentleman farmer from Texas. But there was a decade of anarchy at Alabama. It's hard to replace a legend. And now fast forward to present day. How much chaos have you witnessed in Tuscaloosa? Now, I know last season did not go the way Alabama fans expected it to, wanted it to. They were seriously doubting the hire of Kalen DeBoer when they lost on the road at Vanderbilt, at Tennessee, at Oklahoma. And we won't even speak of the bowl game against Michigan. It was that forgettable. And so going into the season, there were a lot of doubts about Kalen DeBoer. And what do they do right out of the chute? They fall on their faces in Tallahassee. A loss that looks worse and worse as the season goes on. But we're not holding it against them. The College Football Playoff Committee didn't hold it against them. Alabama checked in at number 4 because all Alabama has done since is win 7 straight games. 4 of those games on consecutive weekends against ranked opponents, 2 of them on the road. No one in SEC history had ever done that. And then they showed some serious intestinal fortitude, some heavy metal, METTLE, by going to South Carolina and pulling that one out of the fire late. I don't know that we have fully appreciated. Maybe you had to live through the 80s in this state. And the 80s in college football in Alabama were like the 1960s in America. Lunacy ran rampant in the streets. It wasn't like it had ever been before. People weren't ready for the changes that were coming. and they pushed back against those changes, and they didn't riot per se, but it was a very tumultuous time in football in the state of Alabama. We haven't had anything close to that since Kalen DeBoer took over for Nick Saban. Think about that. Think about that accomplishment alone. And of course, he's done it by winning. That's how you're measured as a college football coach. That's how you keep the wolves at bay. That's how you keep the boosters from ringing up the athletic director or the trustees and wailing about the current head coach, maybe urging for a change. And by the way, whatever happened to that woman, remember after the Florida State loss, the first game of the season for Alabama? Remember the woman who went on television, on social media? She went viral. She was playing the lottery, and she said that if she won the lottery, she was going to dedicate part of her winnings to covering Kalen DeBoer's buyout. I hope if she ever does win the lottery, I don't think she won it on that occasion. She will put her money to better use for mankind in general, her family in particular. But no one's having those discussions now. No one's talking about Kalen DeBoer, except the occasional fanciful coaching search mention in connection to, say, Penn State. I've seen people throw his name out for that job. Why would you leave Alabama? Why would you leave Alabama to go anywhere? Why would you leave Alabama to go to Penn State? And particularly go back to the 60s, our version of the 60s in college football in this state, which was the 1980s. Ray Perkins actually left Alabama to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of all places in the NFL. And, I didn't even mention this part of the chaos at the time. Maybe the most disheartening, dispiriting thing that happened to Alabama football in the 1980s. It wasn't losing to Auburn 4 straight times. It wasn't watching Auburn win 3 straight SEC championships. It wasn't watching Bill Curry come from Georgia Tech, which really upset the old school Alabama fans because of the rivalry between Bobby Dodd and Bear Bryant. The most heinous thing that happened was Auburn got Alabama's ass on Auburn's grass for the first time, 1989. Ray Perkins wanted no part of that. It's part of the reason he didn't stay. He knew he couldn't stop it. He railed against it. He did everything in his power behind the scenes to stop it, but there was no stopping it. And the Iron Bowl went on campus, and then eventually Alabama saw the light, improved its own stadium, and now it's where it should be, on campus, in Tuscaloosa, and in Auburn, where it'll be this year. So that we have had nothing close to that. We have had zippity-doo-dah sunny days with Alabama football, relatively speaking. As calm as you can be in a college football program that expects to win every single game, that expects to compete for a championship every single year. And nobody's talking about it. We're going to talk about it. We just talked about it. We're going to give Kalen DeBoer and Greg Byrne, the athletic director, who quickly identified Kalen DeBoer, had already done that, and quickly went and got his man and kept the Alabama machine humming as smoothly as humanly possible. And now you look all around. Look at Auburn, looking for a new coach. Look at LSU, looking for a new coach. And there's Alabama rolling toward a possible SEC championship, a probable playoff berth, and a potential national championship, the latest in the series. That is an accomplishment worth noting and applauding. So who's going to win Saturday? Come on. Let's look at the prediction. You can't pick LSU to win this game. You can pick LSU and suggest strongly, and I will, that they will play their tails off, that they will leave it all on the field. Whatever cliche you like, they're going to bring it. They've had a week off to adjust to this interim coach, to breathe a sigh of relief that the antagonistic Brian Kelly is now gone. I doubt Frank Wilson is going to get in everybody's face on the sideline at one point or another and berate them degrade them, belittle them the way Brian Kelly liked to do on a regular basis. So LSU is going to come in fresh with a good attitude, but so's Alabama. They've had a week off. They needed it after 5 straight SEC games. They're going to be rested. They're going to be refreshed, and they're going to be ready for the stretch run. As I said, you're likely going to see them in Atlanta for the SEC championship game and then in the playoff beyond. So while I think this game will be close for a while, and Frank Wilson will provide that interim guy bump, Alabama is going eventually to show who's the better football team, who's been the better football program for the better part of the last almost 15 years now, and who's one of the best football teams in the country. It's Alabama under Kalen DeBoer. Prediction, Alabama 27, LSU 17. It'll still be fun. Won't quite be as fun as the game of the century. All right, that's going to do it for us for today. Really appreciate you watching, listening. As I said, if you're watching on YouTube at some point between now and Saturday night, we appreciate if you will subscribe to the channel. Helps us. Won't cost you nothing. I'm Kevin Skarbinski. This is ScarboKnows. Thank you to Brendan Martin. Check out all the great shows on the Sidelines.live network. Oh, little preview. Tonight, Thursday night, November 6th, I'm going to be on the Buddy Martin Show. It's a great privilege for me to hang out with the great Buddy Martin. Can't wait for that. I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of coaching change chatter at Florida, Auburn, and elsewhere. Hope you'll check that out tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central Time on the Sidelines.live network. Thanks again to Brendan Martin, the executive producer extraordinaire. Thank you to you, and thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services. Check them out. They'll take great care of you. They're up next. I'm out. See ya.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.